In a 2007 interview with video game designer and comic book writer Chris Avallone, one of 1998's Fallout 2's designers, as well as 1999's cult classic Planescape Torment's lead designer, and fellow Black Isle Studio alumni Colin McComb, known for his work on designing the Planescape setting for Dungeons & Dragons, as well as one of Planescape Torment's designers, expressed an interest in making a Planescape Torment spiritual sequel. But to make such a thing happen, however, they would have to gather together the scattered team after Black Isle Studios shut down in 2003, as well as find a understanding investor.
Is it $1 billion franchise?
Probably not.
Then I can't help you.
So you're turning down a game that the fans want.
Hey, I'm a publisher.
The combination of the two for this to happen, however, was deemed unlikely, because as beloved and influential as Planescape Torment was, it was also a commercial failure, selling a total of 73,000 copies by March of 2000, 4 months after release. Whatever hopes Chris and Collins had during this interview was not going to happen with the help of traditional video game backing. A solution to this problem, however, would appear 5 years later with the release of the crowd-funded game Double Fine Adventure.
$1 million in 24 hours. Tim Schafer, you just made $1 million in 24 hours. What are you doing?
I gotta make a game.
Over the last few days, Tim Schafer from Double Fine took to crowdfunding site Kickstarter to fund his next game.
It feels like a happening. You know what I mean? Like it feels like an event.
They're raising money at a clip of $1,000 per minute. It's incredible.
So the game.
It could just be Barf Zone. People love Barf, dude.
Oh, no, they don't.
Later renamed to Broken Age, that shockingly raised over $3 million through Kickstarter when it asked for $400,000. While crowd-funded games did happen before this point, it was not deemed as viable and limited to small-scale games. But Broken Age changed that. And now, if there was going to be any sort of sequel to Planescape Torment, it would have to be by the thumbs up of its players. Chris and Collins, however, weren't in a position to take advantage of this, as Chris had become one of the co-founders of Obsidian Entertainment, where he worked on some of the greatest games of the 2000s and the 2010s. And Collins went on to co-found 3LB Games, a virtual game studio, as well as teaching at the International Academy of Design and Technology. But the idea would seem never truly left Collins.
This is the game we want to make. A game of depth, passion, and emotion. A game that lets you decide the answer to the question, what does one life matter? We're looking to find that answer. Will you join us?
As in 2012, it was announced that he would join In Exile, a studio made up of former Planescape employees, to work on Wasteland 2, a crowd-funded video game as a writer. The people and the idea had gathered. It still wasn't smooth sailings, however, as attempts to acquire the Planescape license from Wizards of the Coast earlier in the year ended in failure. They were, however, able to acquire the title Torment later in the same year. And in January of 2013, In Exile's CEO Brian Fargo officially announced the spiritual successor to Planescape Torment was in pre-production and would be set in the Numenera RPG universe created by Monte Cook, who worked as a designer on the Planescape setting. This was truly the greatest compromise they could have made with the licensing issues they had. Speaking of, due to these issues, any direct connections to Planescape Torment would need to be kept subtle. but more harder to copyright RPG elements would likely reappear. And thus, in early March of 2013, a Kickstarter crowdfund was started for the goal of 900,000 US. It was now up to the people, and they did not disappoint, as 6 hours into the campaign, the goal was reached. In fact, this Kickstarter was so successful, it went on to become the #1 most crowdfunded RPG on Kickstarter at the time, reaching a total of 4,188,927. They smashed it, alongside some very notable people like Ming Liang Tang, CEO of Razer USA, and even Marcus Pearson, aka Notch, the creator of Minecraft himself. And any extra gain was placed back into the game by bringing in more artists to work on it, like Brian Mitsuda, writer for Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, or George Zietz, the creative lead for Neverwinter Nights 2, Mask of the Betrayer. And at the 3.5 million goal, Chris Avalon joined the team. His former partner in crime from that original interview, Colin McComb, can summarize his addition far better than I ever could.
I've been asked to say a few words about the addition of Chris Avalone to our team, and I believe that probably shouts of joyful profanity are more appropriate. That is how I feel about the addition of Chris to our project. We look forward to his contributions. Thank you.
The reason this was possible was because he left Obsidian and was working freelance on some of the best games ever created, like Divinity Original Sin 2. This was a powerhouse of a team. Each one of these people could be creative leads on their own, but together, who knows what they could do? But it wouldn't be for 3 years later, in 2016, and 9 years after the Chris and Collins interview, and a further 17 years after Planescape Torment was released, when Torment Tides of Numenera was finally released, that we would find out. Going forwards from this point, I will be talking about the game itself. While I won't spoil anything too major, I'm going to give this part a minor spoiler warning. If you've heard all that I've talked about and want the best experience out of this game, I would say you should go into it blind. So click off here or skip to my final thoughts segment in the end. You have been warned. To start off, I want to talk about this game's title, Torment Tides of Numenera. While those words sound like they were chosen at random when spoken out loud, it's actually accurate to what the game is about. See, Numenera is the combination of two different words. Numen, the root Latin word for pervading divine presence, and era, as in an era 1 billion years in the future. So yes, this game does take place on Earth, but in our far future, and it is now referred to as the 9th world, due to the fact that 9 great civilizations have risen and fallen by this point. And this ties back into the Numen world of Numenera. See, divine pervading presence doesn't actually have much to do with gods in this game, but with the Arthur Clarke third law interpretation of it, stating that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Think of a caveman seeing an airplane. Wouldn't he think it's some sort of divine creature? Now keep that in mind and add to it that in the 9th world, artifacts of the 9 civilizations can be found everywhere in this world. And these artifacts, or Numen, could in theory do anything and everything, but people in this world casually disregard them because what they are and what they do has been lost to time. So that's Numenera. As for the tides, tides in this game refer to an all-encompassing invisible power like wind or gravity or the force that certain individuals can perceive and use to influence the emotions of others. That is the tides. And torment, as far as I understand, just means torment. So, if you use all that, this game could translate to torment of the emotions of the pervading divine presence 1 billion years in the future. Or if you want something even more coherent, torment of the emotions of the planet, which is better but still vague and confusing as to what is going on here. Unless you've played this game, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. And due to the nature and grandness of this setting, I can't go into any more detail without spoiling things. Just know that anything and everything could happen in this game. To prove this, I will give a brief description of a side quest. You can buy, then free a slave that then goes on to apprentice under a master craftsman whose other apprentice is him from the past who time traveled into the future when a gargantuan interdimensional stomach opened a mouth under him and swallowed him as he was going for a stroll. And that's just a throwaway side quest. I cannot talk about the events of this game without spoiling something. So going forwards, I'm issuing a moderate spoiler warning. You have been warned. This game starts off with a bang, quite literally, as the moon implodes while you plummet towards the earth. Your character, as they fall, can't help but notice they have no idea who they are or what the hell is going on. That's up until they crash land into a building and die. And that is why it's so hard to talk about anything in this game. It's so spoilery by nature of what it is. Your character then wakes up in a dark void. This is the game's tutorial, if you want to call it that. In here, you get a choice between a glaive, a jack, and a nano, or in traditional terms, a warrior, a mage, and a jack of all trades, master of all if you play your cards right. And I'm saying this now, as someone who likes warriors the most, pick the mage. If you choose to play this game, you will thank me. As for why, I'll get into that a bit later. In the next section, you are approached by the Spectre, who reveals to you that he is you or a fragment of you, and where you currently are is in your mind. And that is as much as you get from him as you are attacked by entities called the Sorrow, who destroy other fragments of you. This is the game's first battle, and once done, the Spectre explains that some of the Sorrow fragments have scattered into your mind and are gonna wreak a havoc. As for what the Sorrow is, he has no idea, just that it wants you dead, and if you want to stop it, you need to wake up and get into a device called the Resonance Chamber. And as for how he knows any of this, while you yourself don't, he just says he doesn't know. Upon waking up, for real this time, a blast of energy escapes from you and knocks 2 people down to the ground, them being Allegern and Calistage, who start bickering as you try to understand just what is going on. And from talking to them, we finally get to understand who we are and what's happening. First of all, we did in fact crash land here, and our body was in fact destroyed but got back together because we are immortal. The reason for this is because we are a cast-off of the Changing God, who is a mortal who found a way to leave his body and enter other ones he creates. The process of doing so creates cast-offs out of the empty husks. As when his mind leaves the body, a new mind is made for it. The Changing God has lived an uncountable amount of years and has learned many things in this time. So he isn't a traditional god, but the Arthur Clarke interpretation of it, which means he knows so much that he may as well be one. And each time he creates a new body for himself, he improves upon it, making most of them near perfect immortals and extremely powerful, but is known to discard bodies if he finds himself in bad situations. Let's say like falling from the moon while being chased by the Sorrow. You may question why a man who claimed the name God without anyone challenging him would fear and run away from the Sorrow, or why we, an immortal who fell from the atmosphere, crashed and survived, should fear it. I can answer both of these like this. If the Changing God, someone who is so knowledgeable he is a god, fears and runs away from it, that is good enough of a reason for us to also fear and run away from it. And we don't know where the Changing God currently is, thanks to that. But what we do know is that the resonance chamber we need to stop the Sorrow is right behind us, as it is the thing we crash landed onto and destroyed. And now if we want to live, we need to fix it somehow. That is the basic premise. From here on out, you go to various places and talk to many characters, some of whom are fellow cast-offs. This is a very exposition-heavy game, with many dialogue checks in between. While there is combat, it is by no means a focus of the game, as I'm more than sure you can avoid or get through all combat without even throwing a punch, aside from the tutorial fight that is. That's why I said to pick Mage earlier, as dialogue checks are related to intelligence, and mages obviously have the highest. While you could beat the game with any class, if it's your first playthrough, you will miss out on a lot of things if you pick a jack or especially a warrior. Speaking of combat, it's probably this game's weakest aspect, in my opinion, of course. It's not bad by any means, and it gets the job done, but there's not much to it. Combat here is turn-based. When it's your turn, you basically just run up to an enemy and smack it. And that's it, really. But later in the game, things change a bit with skills like teleporting or hooking your enemies to you, or using passive guard stances to attack enemies while they pass by you. You also have these things called ciphers. One-time use weapons that can do different things like acid bombs or magical blasts. And that's cool and all, but they are one-time use. So you'll be thinking the entire time, I should save these for something later. But later never comes. So use them when you have them. That's my advice. Joining the ciphers are artifacts. Equipment for bonus stats like rings basically, that come with annoying drawbacks. Like you get bonus attack damage, but it also lowers your strength pool for using it. And they're all like that, so I don't like using them. Wouldn't it make more sense for it to be something else related to intelligence instead? That way I could equip it to my warrior who doesn't use intelligence. You know, basic RPG equipment managing. There are passives you can get to mitigate these effects, but they feel like a waste to pick when combat is such a low priority in this game. Also, remember when I said your character is immortal? Well, that has the potential to trivialize fights. Like when this cultist exploded and killed my entire party only for me to revive and loot her corpse moments later. It was funny, of course, but not all fights are like that. You can die to some enemies. Overall, combat feels really bare bones to me, but that may be due to me playing better games in that same combat style, like in Divinity Original Sin 2, where you can combine attacks with the environment to do combo damage or fuse different skills from different classes into something entirely unique for yourself. To me, that is what turn-based combat in this style should be. And look, I'm not saying you should hate this game because of how I feel about the combat. I'm saying don't go into this expecting the same thing I was here. Avoid it or take it for what it is. Well, as I'm on the topic of complaining about things, this game has a time progress system, the inclusion of which is interesting, and it has the potential to add a lot of replay value to the game, but is both severely underutilized and annoying as to how it happens. First off, this is strictly for side quests only, and only some of them. Here's how it works. When you go to sleep and have the right quest, time will pass, and the conditions of the quest will change. For example, I was investigating a murder mystery when I was forced to stop due to my intelligence pool being low. That was bad because you need that to pass dialogue checks. To reset, you need to sleep, and I did, only to be woken up by an NPC and told that while I did sleep, there was a second murder. That was cool to me. It instantly added a deeper layer to this game. Or so I thought, until I did it again and the end result of the quest was the same, even if the path to get to it changed slightly. And that's one of the 2 quests like that I found. There are others that do this, but like I said, I only found the 2 of them because of how it gets triggered when you go to sleep. And I didn't need to sleep as my pools got bigger. What I'm trying to say here is, I don't like the way it gets triggered or how it feels like a punishment. Like, if I'm at the point where I need to sleep, then I'm at a point where I don't have the pools to pass dialogue checks. So I couldn't have done anything anyways. And from what I understand, time passing in a quest is always a bad thing. Like with this quest, if I went to sleep a second time, another person would have been murdered. Or in another quest called Shaky Foundations, where buildings were falling off cliffs, there is no positives to passing time. And that is a shame, as it's a mechanic with so much potential. Like, imagine placing characters in different places so you can speak to them when you're on a quest that reveals to you different circumstances or different perspectives that could influence the quest's ending for better or worse. That would be cool, but highly unlikely to happen with this game's budget, admittedly. Next thing I want to complain about is the companions, as they just aren't that interesting, except one that has the potential to be, but it only happens in the last hour of the game because of time travel shenanigans. Now, don't misunderstand me here. I'm not saying that what's happening to them isn't interesting. Like, Alagern has living tattoos for some reason, and Catastage has overlapping copies of herself from other realities. What's happening to them is interesting, but they themselves aren't. They're just boring. Plus, they have no reason to be there. In my opinion, if a game allows you to have traveling companions, I always feel like they need to have some sort of story relevance to justify them being in the party. In this game, however, they don't. The only one who does is Matkina, who is your fellow cast-off, so it's relevance by association. Of the others, maybe but I never really did finish his quest, so I don't know. For the others, they have their own reasons for being there, but none that will connect them to what's happening with the narrative. And since I bothered to bring them along, I would have at least appreciated them talking a bit more, like Alagern and Catastage in the beginning. But no, after that, traveling companions turn into stoic followers who only speak when it's related to their own quest. Aside from Matkina, who is a cast-off and actually has something to say about what's going on with the story. And that's funny because Matkina is supposed to be the stoic assassin character, and she speaks more than all of them, even with being the last companion you can find. But in case you care about them more than I did, you'll be pleased to know that every companion has a few different personal endings depending on if you bring them along or how you interacted with them. Some of them being heartwarming and others downright tragic, so be mindful of that. The last thing I'm going to complain about is glitches, and there are a few of them I've encountered. The first one I got was Alagern's model breaking, causing his hair to stretch out. It's a small thing really, a distracting but ultimately harmless glitch. The second one though was worse. See, this is a role-playing game with a vast number of things you can interact with to get more context about the world. You see something, you click on it, and it gives you a little text box that says what this thing is about for a few seconds, then it goes away. Except it didn't. It stayed there taking up a portion of the screen for minutes until I eventually had enough. I reloaded it and it was still there. I had to close the game and open it again. That's annoying, and it happened to me more than once until I got to the point where I just stopped clicking on things just to avoid the hassle. And in case you didn't think that was bad enough, the last glitch I got was the worst. I lost the ability to interact with things entirely. I was scared I would have to do a new game due to that, but thankfully it was fixed again when I shut it off and reloaded it. So if you play this game, expect some jank. My complaining being said, this game isn't about those things though. It's not about the combat, nor the time progress system, nor the companions, or even the glitches. It's about the narrative and the setting. Tides of Numenera. Both of which I can't talk about unless I intend to spoil the whole thing, which I am. So going forwards, I am issuing a severe spoiler warning. If you have any intention of trying this game at all, click off this video or skip to my final thoughts segment. You have been warned for the last time. The story of this game has already happened before your character, the last cast-off, woke up. Lines have been drawn, battles fought, lives lost, and fate literally altered. You've just been playing catch-up the entire time, piecing together what happened before the final choice. You first learn a bit of what's going on from Mackai, then a bit more at the cast-off sanctuary, Mile Avest. The reason cast-offs need a sanctuary is due to the sorrow killing them. That is what the conflict of this game is about. Avoiding the sorrow. The conflict part comes from the divide between the Changing God and his cast-offs, as he believes he found a way to escape the sorrow. But Maralel, who is his first cast-off, absolutely does not believe in it. This divide between the two of them sparked a centuries-long war called the Endless Battle between the cast-offs who believe in the Changing God as their father and follow him, and the cast-offs who believe in the first cast-off as their eldest sibling and follow her. This war revolves around two ancient devices called the Reconceiver of Truth and the Rejoiner of Fate. The first one allows the user to look into possible realities and lock in the one they want. The first cast-off used this device to gain the advantage over the Changing God for a while, until he found the second one that allows the user to unlock realities. The conflict reached a stalemate until the first cast-off died, and her second in command accidentally locked in that reality. The Changing God soon then vanished. But the endless battle still continues to this day by each faction's second in command. And that's all great and fantastic and all, but it has nothing to do with you. The reason you're here is to fix the resonance chamber and escape the sorrow. To do that, Mackai told you you'll need to find a cast-off by the name of Mazov. Mazov isn't at Male Avest though, but Adris, a cast-off who is the voice of reason between the warring cast-offs, knows where he is. But to tell you, she wants you to mediate between two cast-offs who are from opposing camps of the Endless War. This is to both teach you a lesson and see if you are worthy of receiving a Mare Caster, an object that holds a person's memories, and in this Mare Caster, Mazov is in it. This wouldn't be a problem normally, but all cast-offs have a unique skill to themselves they excel at. They can be good speakers, have strong intuitions, or they could be capable of erasing someone's memories. But the last cast-off has the ability to change the past using a Mare Caster, not just view it as a memory video. Cast-offs are by no means created equal. That's why the first cast-off looks like this. She was the first and least advanced of them all. After gaining Adris's trust, you can enter the Marecaster and find Mazov, who grows suspicious of you when you start asking him about the Resonance Chamber, because he helped build it with the Changing God and knows what he intends to use the Resonance Chamber for. He wants to merge himself with all the other cast-offs. He hopes that by doing that, he can stop the Sorrow from trying to kill him. But doing that will kill all the cast-offs. And Mazov, being on the side of the first after the Changing God ripped out his eyes in an effort to make sure he doesn't become a problem, does not want you using the Resonance Chamber for the Changing God's purpose. As the first cast-off, who he reveals to still be alive, has her own plans for the Resonance Chamber that won't kill the cast-offs. And she is located at a place called the Bloom. And as soon as he says that, you get ripped out of the Marecaster and dragged into your own mind again, where you are confronted by the Spectre, the fragment of yourself from the beginning of the game. Only it isn't. It's the Changing God. He's been lying to you from the start. Now that he knows that the first is alive, he wants his body back. And that you should surrender yourself to him because you are just a child who is playing at things that you have no idea about. You could give him your body here, but that results in a game over. The true path here is to resist him in any way you can. Eventually he gives up, but he is still in your mind, waiting and watching. Your troubles aren't over yet, however, as when you wake up, you discover that the Sorrow has attacked Mael Avest and you need to get out now, as it's here that you can see what the Sorrow is truly capable of. Yeah, that attack is not survivable by any character at any level. Any one of them hit by that is deleted, and I mean deleted, gone, dead, never to return. You being immortal doesn't matter here. Your only choice is to run. Unfortunately, in all this chaos, the teleporter you used to get here got destroyed. We are screwed. But we may have one last hope. The first cast-off left a mystery contraption at Mael Avest that, according to some cast-offs, may have been left there in case the Sorrow ever managed to get into their sanctuary. Adris, however, doesn't think we'll make it in time and chooses to use herself as bait to draw away the Sorrow, to save us and whatever other cast-offs we can, despite her being absolutely terrified. Her sacrifice isn't in vain, and we escape using the device that isn't some simple teleporter. It's more of an extra-dimensional one that leads us to the Bloom. A trans-dimensional, inside-out, upside-down, gargantuan stomach that hungers and feasts on intelligence and emotions using sentient maws. And the place Mazov said we could find the first. We are greeted by a local named Drogon, who immediately deduces that we are a cast-off. He knows this because he's done business with the Changing God. We ask him a few questions to which he gladly responds. When we ask him about the other cast-offs that should have come to the Bloom with us, he explains that they most likely did make it here but ended up in different sections of the Bloom, them being in other dimensions, so we're never seeing them again. When we ask him about the first cast-off, he explains that the only one who could know where she is the Memovia. That is not a name, but a title for the de facto leader of the Bloom, due to the fact they can communicate with it. Being a person of importance, the Memovia won't just meet anyone, but Drogon can get us an audience with her if we help him out first. by retrieving an artifact he let the Changing God borrow from him, but never gave back, called the Magmatic Amulet. Having no other leads, we agree, which ultimately leads us to one of the Changing God's hidden bases, which we get a bit more from his perspective and the Magmatic Amulet. As we are going back though, we are stopped by a man named Doran, the prophet of the Changing God. He isn't a cast-off, nor has he ever met the Changing God. It's more of a case of a genuine cult that reveres the Changing God as a true god. The man himself, though, in no way cares about them, but is willing to use them if need be, such as in this case where, despite still being trapped in our head, found a way to communicate with Doran in order to help him take our body. This confrontation can go down in a few ways. Sure, you could fight them, or you can do what I did and intimidate them to the point where they stop. Either way, Doran does not survive as the Changing God explodes his head. Following that awkward encounter, we find the way back has closed due to the bloom shifting. This is where you're supposed to use the amulet, where you discover it can help someone communicate with the bloom, that being an ability only the Mamovia should have. Obviously, Drogon is not what he seems for wanting this, but that's not our problem to deal with. We give him the amulet and he fulfills his end of the bargain by getting us a meeting with the Mamovia, who says she can point us in the direction of the first, but first we need to do something for her. Seeing a pattern here. Retrieving her second in command, a scholar by the name of Ishen, who the bloom swallowed. That is significant for a few reasons. The first is the fact that that happened means she is no longer able to communicate with the bloom. And the bloom, being what it is, has some influence over time, meaning she is destined to be eaten by it the same way the last Mamovia was, who is now a ghost haunting the entrails of the bloom. The second, now that she no longer has its favor, the position of Mamovia is up for grabs. This may not sound like much, but it is, as the Changing God himself had no other choice but to use the amulet to interact with it. The bloom is a powerful thing. And third, getting someone back from the bloom and assuming they haven't been eaten and turned into a ghost first means going into the bloom's inner depths. But in Ishen's case, it means going into its heart. That is a suicide mission. But between the bloom eating us and the sorrow deleting us, we choose the former. And thanks to the heroic sacrifice of this killing machine, we are able to open a maw that leads us to the bloom's inner depths. This place is filled with the traumatized ghosts of what it ate, some of whom can be people that you were involved feeding to it. Those awkward high school reunions, am I right? You can make your way down by either fighting, avoiding, or manipulating these phantoms and eventually make it to the heart. But that's as far as your companions are willing to go. Talking to the bloom is a solo encounter, unless you manipulate or force them. The bloom doesn't talk with words or even thoughts. It communicates with intent. The bloom is a creature that feeds on intelligence and can permanently harm you here if you let it, but overall this encounter is largely beneficial to you, as it reveals to you another piece of the Changing God's past, further completing the puzzle of the story. Then it just leaves you alone and frees Ishen. But when seeing Ishen, you recognize him as Mazov, and he recognizes you as the one who is controlling the cast of Zarian from the Marecaster. Mazov, not knowing the circumstances as to why you are here, thinks you're an ally, and lets slip that the Memovia is actually the first cast-off in disguise. Then goes off to rejoin her, but as he does that, he drops a Marecaster. From what you've seen so far, you've probably come to the conclusion that the first cast-off is the hero of this story, but you'd be wrong, as this Marecaster reveals to us a different perspective of the destruction of Mael Avest. The whole reason it was able to get in was because the first cast-off turned off the shields in hopes that the sorrow would kill you, and in the process doomed all the other cast-offs in there, both on the side of the Changing God as well as her own. The reason she even knew you would be there is because you spoke to Mazov in the Marecaster and he told her about it later. Classic time manipulation shenanigans. Making it back from the bloom, we confront our sister, the First, who reveals to us that she has the resonance chamber and that Mazov is calibrating it. She is willing to answer your questions while he's doing that, but if you try to stop this, she will kill you. First off, the reason she lied and tried to have you killed is because she can't be sure you're not on the Changing God's side. And when you spoke to Mazov in the Marecaster, she realized that you, and by extension he, were getting close. That's why she tried to have you killed at Mael Avest. But that wasn't the only time. As when she sent you to find Mazov, she was hoping that the bloom would kill you. She was ready for Mazov to die if it meant you would too, but even if you succeeded, she would have Mazov back to finish the resonance chamber, a win for her in either scenario. And as for how she plans to use the resonance chamber, she intends to use it to stop the sorrow. So far, I haven't explained why the sorrow is chasing us, and that's because no one is 100% sure why that is. It doesn't bother to speak to anyone, it just kills them. But there is speculation that it has to do with the tides that all cast-offs and the Changing God emit as a byproduct of him using it to hop bodies. But there is no proof of this. Hell, even the Changing God himself doesn't know. But that is the purpose of the chamber originally. Stop the emission of the tides by fusing all cast-offs into a single body with the Changing God in control. But that would kill the cast-offs. The First, however, with the help of Mazov, modified it so it can smash the connection that all cast-offs have with each other and stop their tide usage, saving them all. That is what this is all about, and who the First is. She is willing to do anything if it means saving the cast-offs, even if it includes killing cast-offs. She is a hypocrite who tries to save her family even at the cost of it. Regardless, you have a choice to make here. Allow her to enact her plan, or stop her due to a memory you saw of the Changing God and a different cast-off, warning how both her and his plans would end up killing all of them, or fight her and use the resonance chamber yourself to merge all the cast-offs into yourself. But no matter what choice you pick here, a fight ensues as the sorrow invades to stop the activation of the chamber. And depending on whatever choice you made before the sorrow came, this can go down in a few different ways. First one is you and the First team up together to hold off the sorrow long enough for the chamber to activate. but in the meantime you can betray her and activate it yourself. Or the other way is that you and the first fight each other, then the sorrow comes in and it turns into a messy free-for-all fight in which you need to try and get to the chamber or it activates. Either way, once the chamber activates, you and every other single cast-off are pulled into your mind, where a cast-off who has no idea how she knows this tells you you are one of the few that can move here due to the fact that the Changing God made you to do this, to act as the vessel to hold everyone. But the first is also able to move right now because she got a power-up from the resonance, and the Changing God is also in here. So it's a race in your mind to get to the central control cortex to decide the fate of the cast-offs. Now that your mind has unraveled like this, you get to see a few significant memories of the Changing God that act like mirrorcasters in which you can influence his past. And now that we've gotten to this point, it's finally time to talk about him. In the beginning of the game, you can find a side quest called Ashen Imitation, in where a ghostly woman is haunting a psychic's hangout bar. If you approach her, she doesn't really respond, but she does grab you by your throat and strangles you to death. This is how you continue the mission in your mind, where the woman is now coherent, and she tells you she had an incurable disease, and in order to save her, her father placed her in a container that would keep her alive while he searched for a way to cure her. And one of these ways was to curse women into becoming her. After talking to all these cursed women in the real world, you can continue exploring your mind for answers in where you can find the phantom memories of her father and convince him to shut off the machine that's keeping her alive in order to save all the women that are being turned into her. This doesn't fix the problem as the real machine is in the real world, but we know how to turn it off now. All we need to do is find it. And the place we find it at is one of the Changing God's hideouts. In case it wasn't obvious enough, her father is the Changing God, and she is his motive for doing what he does. He is trying to save her no matter what it takes or how long it takes to do it. And the fact that he has potentially hundreds, if not thousands of cast-offs, he has spent a long time and has sacrificed many things in order to save his beloved daughter. But he doesn't view the cast-offs in the same way. He sees them as sparks of himself at best, or a change of clothes at worst. A fact that traumatized the first when he told her his plan of consuming the other cast-offs in order to save himself from the sorrow, when she viewed him as her father. And that's how we find her in our mind, trapped arguing with the memories of that day. We help our sister out and form an unspoken alliance. Deeper in your mind, you can find the ghost of the Changing God's daughter. Her name is Mackai. If you did the side quest, she shows up for the remainder of this. Or more importantly, for the next confrontation with the Changing God. Or it would have been if we hadn't seen a different memory of the Changing Gods, of the day of our birth, in which the Changing God was on the moon and in the last stage of his plan to use the chamber. All he needed to do was get to it. Something he never got the chance to do, as the sorrow attacked him right before he could get into the escape shuttle to the chamber. He barely failed and got tagged by the sorrow. That's when you wake up to see the destruction of the moon, because at that point, the Changing God was already dead. He would have had a backup body normally, but you were supposed to be the last cast-off, the one he would stay in. so there was no other one made. It was just bad luck that got him. As for this Changing God, that's an AI copy of his mind, as the Changing God likes to have someone to bounce ideas and theories off of, but after the whole endless battle fiasco, he switched from cast-offs to AI. A fact that when told shakes the AI, but still presses on from. That's until Mackai, his supposed daughter, reveals that she does not recognize it. That defeats it and causes it to vanish. This is the final section of the game, the last chance to back out. But first, I want to give a bit more context towards the fate of the Changing God, as it's one of three options. The first, he really is just dead. The second is that his mind was destroyed due to the Sorrow's attack, and while technically alive, is in a vegetable-like state, but you get to see his memories as a side effect of him still being in you. This could explain those fragment pieces that the Sorrow attacked in the beginning of the game. As for 3, you are him and just don't remember anything. To support option 3, you have a skill called Amnesia. And I think the third one to be the most likely of the 3 and the most ironic, as the man who abandons his children with amnesia ended up with it himself. But either of these it is, he is gone now, because people are the culmination of their memories, and his is just gone. Into the center of your mind, inside the resonance, you find the sorrow itself. But instead of attacking you, it chooses to speak for the first time. It reveals that during the moon encounter, it placed a fragment of itself in your mind. You can see this in the beginning in the tutorial. The purpose of this was to act as a final guard in case the Changing God got inside the resonance chamber, as a last attempt at communication with the Changing God, as it has spent countless years chasing him and wishes for it to end. But seeing as the Changing God is dead, you will have to take his place. It explains that the problem is with the abuse of the tides by the Changing God and the cast-offs, as use of it can cause damage on a grand scale, even by its perspective. We can see this with Alagern and Calistage. After you wake up in the beginning, they start to fight with each other. This is just something cast-offs do by existing, even with each other, as seen with the endless battle. The tides essentially escalate conflict on a dimensional scale, and it cannot be allowed to run rampant. That's what it is for. It's sort of like a guard dog for grander beings. That never really gets touched up upon or brought up again, but that's what it is. As for now, it's ultimatum time. The first choice it gives you is the Changing God's plan to use the resonance to merge with all the cast-offs. This will work for the tide problem, and it will allow this, but it will not allow it to be someone like the Changing God, who it believes after centuries of chasing him, he would have created more cast-offs, as by nature he wants to experience new things. Here are your options for who you can have be the one. Yourself, Matkina the First, or the daughter of the Changing God, Mackai, but it reveals she will succumb to her illness eventually. The second option, the first plan, to use the resonance chamber to sever the connection between the cast-offs. This it would not allow, as this plan involves using the resonance as a hammer to smash the protections over the tide, and it could, even if it did work, shatter the minds of thousands. The third option is to use the resonance as a knife instead of a hammer, meaning the cast-offs would live and their connection would be severed, but they would still individually produce tides. This option basically resets everything to how it was before we got into the resonance. It would still have to hunt us down one by one, but it would ultimately allow this too. Picking up on a pattern there, you question what it wouldn't allow. And it answers that the resonance holds the power to combine, sever, and remove the protections over the tides entirely. And doing that would cause damage to the physical and mental landscapes of the world for millennia, killing billions. It will not allow this. And if we try to use the resonance like that, it will resist us with all of its strength. But that's an interesting choice of words. Resist, implying it can be overcome. These are our options. All of them are what they seem, and all of them can be argued for. Like the last one. As in its duty to protect, the sorrow has destroyed planets and ended civilizations. Personally, I wouldn't choose any of these if I was there, as there is no true good ending to be had here. They all have some negative outcome one way or another. Part of me wishes there was some sort of cop-out choice that allows you to bypass all of it, like finding some way to strip tide use from the cast-offs without killing them, or argue that if the tides have the ability to harm others, then surely they can be used to do good. There must be other options to be had in a setting as grand as this, right? But, on the other hand, I feel like all these imperfect endings fit a game like this. This is a world where a world itself gains a body in order to give people prophecies. Where a killing machine gains a conscience after killing so much they feel guilty and wish for death. Where people can eat the bonds of others and use it to open holes into other dimensions. This is a universe where, as unique as you are as the last cast-off, you aren't the only one, not by a long shot. So no matter what you choose here, life as fantastical as Torment Tides of Numenera portrays it to be as, is still just life. And life doesn't end with a pretty bow on top. It goes on for the good and the bad. And what you make of that is your legacy. This game, to me, is proof that you can write just about anything and have it get taken seriously, so long as you present it with some open honesty. But more than that, this is gaming's example of if there's a will, there's a way. So many hoops had to be jumped through to make this game happen. So many people had to gather, all for a spiritual successor to a commercial failure. But it worked. And sure, there have been other crowd-funded spiritual successors and even full-blown sequels, but they usually end up as disappointments or garbage fires. But here is a game that actually succeeded despite the disadvantages it has, and no one talks about it. Sure, this game has its flaws, but what game doesn't? And sure, this game has not left the cultural impact its predecessor has. But at the very least, it deserves to be remembered for what it accomplished in being conceived. So many industry legends came together for this, and even the gamers themselves to have been a part of this makes me envious for not being a part of those end credits. But who knows, maybe 10 years from now, this game's own spiritual successor will be crowdfunded and I can be a part of it. But we'll just have to wait until then and see. But this has been Torment Tides of Numenera, and this has been Andy William Mackai. Mackai Lorien, out.